Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheilla, and our story today is called The Rescue of Mr. Christmas. It was back in the horse and buggy days that the old evergreen school stood on the four corners, not a mile from the little village of Pepperville. Since no one had thought to have school buses yet, the children all had to walk to school. There were two rooms in the school. One was upstairs and one was down. There was a pump out in front where the children could get water when they were thirsty or had gotten too terribly dirty in their play. Well, they played ball in the fall and in the spring, and they built snow forts in the winter. Miss Clarice Vance taught the primary room, and Mr. Temple taught the big upstairs room where the older kids went to class. At the back of each room was a table on which was a water bucket, and on the cloakroom, off to one side, was a long shelf where the children could put their lunch buckets. There was no cafeteria back in those days, so the children had to take lunches to school. They used to open them up at noon and eat at their desks. Well, along about 11 o'clock, you could see the kids looking toward shelf where the pails were for lunch. Most of them had walked a very long distance and were really hungry by the time the last class before noon was over. Each room was heated by a big stove. In the winter, the children would bring scrubbed potatoes, raw potatoes with the skins on them that they scrubbed up so they didn't have any dirt on them. They would put those potatoes on top of that big stove, and they would stay up there to bake. There was often as many as 10 or 12 potatoes roasting there on the stove. Once, nobody could tell why, a potato exploded and blew potatoes all over the schoolroom. The children brought little glasses with butter in them to put on the potatoes, and they took a little bitty scrap of paper and they would lay it out and pour salt in it and fold it up, and that was how they brought salt to put on their potatoes. The children felt as if they'd had a hot meal when they mashed that butter down in the fluffy sides of the roasted potatoes. But the teacher, she felt sorry for the caper children. The mother was not a good cook or a good manager or something, for those poor little creatures would often have nothing but an old soda biscuit with a lumpy piece of greasy bacon hanging out of the side of it. Miss Vance would usually put a little extra food in her lunch pail, so there would be extra sandwich or cake to divide between the wistful little children. They were such hungry-looking little things. It was amazing that any mother would send her children to school so ragged and hungry. Well, the seasons were passing. Halloween had gone by and the children had taken down the decorations. Well, the windows had to be cleaned too to make ready for the turkeys and the shocks and the fodder, with a forward eye to what they would do for Christmas. Well, that was just around the corner after Thanksgiving. Well, on the front blackboard, the teacher was making a chalk picture of the first Thanksgiving. It was on the Monday morning before Thanksgiving that Minnie Caper came to the front of the room as soon as she came to school. She had a package done up in an old paper sack. and she was smiling oh so shyly. Most of the children felt sorry for poor little Minnie, for she had such washed out dresses and holes in her socks, and she had old run-over shoes that were much too big for her. She cried sometimes out on the playground when Roger called her Rag Minnie Bag or Minnie Witch Hazel. For shame, Roger, Louise Baines said once. You had better not let teacher hear you talk like that. She would punish you. And little Minnie stayed close to Louise on the playground after that. Well, on this Monday morning, Minnie shyly undid the old paper bag and brought out a round tin candy box. It had a bright picture of a stagecoach and horses and a large house in which holly wreaths and Christmas trees were showing from the windows. Miss Vance, she said almost in a whisper, Mother was cleaning out the attic and found this pretty box. She said I could bring it to you. Little Minnie heard the snickers from Roger's part of the room. The teacher heard it too and was determined that little Minnie was not going to be ridiculed. She knew that Roger was perfectly capable of whispering to the little girl things like, "You dummy," giving the teacher an old empty box. Why, Minnie, Miss Vance said in her warm, kindly way, this is just what I need to tell the children what I've been thinking about. She put her arm around the thin little girl who smiled happily. She enjoyed the teacher's attention. Put away your books now, boys and girls, and listen to the story. I have to tell you. Miss Vance set the box on the corner of the desk so everyone could see it. Several times a week, she continued in her soft, kindly voice, the rag man goes past my house in the village. I cannot help noticing his old horse. It's so thin and weak, I doubt if it'll live very long. And the other day, the man had such a heavy load on his wagon that the wheels were wobbling on their axles. The poor horse, with sores on its back and badly swollen leg, could hardly pull that heavy load. The ragman beat the poor creature and shouted and even cursed at him. Well, my neighbor went out and told him she was going to report him for treating a horse so badly. Another man came out and said he also would report him to the CPCA if he saw any more of such actions. The first $10 anyone's willing to give me for this old bag of bones can have him, the man shouted. He ain't no good. That's the reason I beat him. He won't work. Well, when Miss Vance got through, the room was so quiet you could almost hear a heartbeat. Boys and girls, let's use this lovely box that Minnie gave me for a treasure chest. Let's buy the ragman's old horse. Let's give that horse a good Christmas. It may be the last Christmas he'll ever have. Jonathan held up his hand. I know that old ragman, he said. His name is Jed Baxter. He's mean. My father said he was put in jail once for beating his own boy. He had to be taken to the hospital. His father beat him so badly. I'm sure he is a cruel man, Miss Vance agreed. It's written on his face, and you can tell it by the way the horse cringes when he's around him. The horse is afraid of him. I'll get the money out of my bank, said one child. I'll bring some, said several others, but Miss Vance told them it ought not to be a burden on their parents. We must earn the money ourselves and have enough to take care of the horse through the winter as well, if it lives. Let's make that horse our little school project." "If it lives," cried Jonathan, "of course it's a lot more likely to live if we treat it good and feed it and let it rest." "I'd like to put some axle grease on them sores on the side of that horse," said Billy Morgan, who told everyone that one day that he was going to be a horse doctor and take care of sick animals. "Ain't nothing better for sores on animals than axle grease." "Oh, that's for wagons," said several at once. "You got your wagons and your horses mixed up." "Let's get back to the horse subject," the teacher said. "Do you think we can get this box full of money before Christmas?" "We will have to get along without some treats, such as candy and the like, but that'll be good for us. I'd rather have Minnie's box full of money for the horse than full of candy," said one. A shout of approval greeted these words, and Minnie smiled till her little thin face almost glowed. "I'm sure there must be some farmer who would let the old horse live in his barn if we pay his board. Won't it be wonderful to give the poor creature at least one good Christmas in his life?" Eddie Wilson held up his hand. "We have got 9 stalls we ain't using. I know my father won't care, and we always have a lot of hay and corn and oats. I can do my share that way." "We all want to help," several children cried out at once. Little Minnie held up her hand. "Let's name him Mr. Christmas," she said in her soft little voice. That name seemed to please everyone. They could hardly get down to their studies for trying to figure out ways of earning money to set up a fund for Mr. Christmas. "Let's pop corn on top of the stove when it's red hot," someone suggested. "Boy, we have a whole bag of it at home and Mom won't care." "We'll bring the butter. We've got 9 cows," said one of the Sonder boys. "The kids sure will buy it when it's only a nickel a bag." "Well, the neighbors will too," contributed another. So the plans went eagerly on for the poor old horse, who did not know the joy ahead of his poor battered life. "I'll tell you what, let's do a real Thanksgiving program and use the collection for Mr. Christmas. And we can have a sale too. Our mothers will send things for us to sell. We can have a real buzzsaw." "You mean bazaar, don't you?" the teacher asked. "And we can sell things we don't want no more. Mom said she wished we could get rid of a lot of stuff. I think it's called an elephant sale." "Ah, you mean a white elephant sale. That's when people sell stuff they don't want and other people might want." The children eagerly decided to do all this and more. New ideas popped up every day. It wasn't long until the whole library corner had to be made into a store to hold the things the children had brought to sell. "I feel sure we'll make enough on our Thanksgiving program and sale to take care of Mr. Christmas all winter," Miss Vance said, a happy hilt in her voice. The children hardly went out for recess after this because they were so excited over the preparations. And Roger Pools was even seen to give each of the Caper children a huge cookie and an egg sandwich. He brought a pair of fine high-top shoes for little Rob. They fitted him to a T. The whole atmosphere of the school changed, all because of interest in Mr. Christmas the horse. They practiced excitedly every spare moment on the best Thanksgiving program the school would ever have. There was always someone practicing on the piano or in the cloakroom, working on their dialogues before and after school and during recess time each day, and several times a day. And money clinked into Minnie's little treasure box, and the little girl beamed with joy. Several children followed Roger's example. Minnie a piece of gingerbread, a big fat banana, or a piece of pie was laid on the desk of either Minnie or Rob. The minute they turned their heads, nobody was to see who they were. The spirit of goodwill and happiness came early that year in the Evergreen School. Doing good makes us feel happy, doesn't it? Asked the teacher when she showed the children how the pile of coins in Minnie's box was getting deeper and deeper. Ain't many of them pennies either, said Bill Holt proudly. Lots of dimes there and nickels and a few quarters even. Well, the whole room was excited, and everyone was trying to think of some new way to add to their little store. Before the day of the program, they had arranged the things to be sold on tables. Someone lugged in new stuff every day. The arithmetic classes made little signs and put prices on everything. Several of the children had spent a lot of time soliciting items, and they had a great deal to sell when the time came. Miss Vance began to wonder if they would sell half of the things before the evening was over. At last the great night came. The schoolyard was full of wagons and buggies and rigs of all kinds. Little Minnie could not stay very far away from her little box that she had brought to the teacher. She had on a new red dress that no one except the teacher had ever seen before. Her hair was combed, and pretty red ribbons were tied in her brown braids. Rob had on a new suit with a pretty red tie. He strutted around in Roger's boots till everyone noticed how glad he was. Miss Vance made Minnie the treasure, and there was a quiet little smile on her face while she put money into the box. Then, wonder of wonders, she produced another box, almost like the first one. I brought this other one, she whispered to the teacher, 'cause I know that one won't hold all the money for the horsey. Mother said you can have this one too. Well, the big classroom was full of parents and friends of the school. Stout men and women wedged themselves into desks that they could hardly get out of when it came time to go home. They proudly listened to their own boys and girls giving a fine Thanksgiving program. There never had been a better one. Everyone agreed to that. Then came the sale. And there was a big surprise. The Ladies' Aid Society in town had heard about what the children were doing and had a whole table of every kind of pie you could think of to sell by the piece. Everyone was full of pie before the evening was even half over. We want a hand in rescuing this Mr. Christmas, the leader told Miss Vance, smiling. We don't want these blessed children to have to do it all. You never saw such a sale. It looked as though they were going to have a sellout, for no one wanted to leave. It was such funny to see old man Mr. Higginbotham buy a box of face powder when his whole face was so covered with whiskers you couldn't find a single place to put any powder on? I'll save it to powder the face of old Mr. Christmas, he said with a big booming laugh. Both of Minnie's boxes were filled up, and if Roger Pools didn't race home and bring back 2 more tin boxes, and they were filled too, he and Minnie and Rob stood there, all of them acting like treasures, guarding the money ever so closely. One old farmer stopped to talk with Miss Vance as he was going out the door. "Well, I reckon you and the children are gonna buy that old nag." Nag, my. Poor Mr. Christmas was a horse. "Like you've been wanting to," he says. "Now, I live right nigh the school here, and I got plenty of space in my barn, and when spring comes, I got plenty of good pasture for Mr. Christmas. The children can come and see Mr. Christmas any time they want to." The children gladly accepted the offer, and they circled around the teacher's desk with Roger, Minnie, and Rob counting the money. Several others counted the money they got in the collection at the program. When it was all added up, there was $385.46. Jonathan's father was a banker, so he took the bag of money to deposit in the fund for Mr. Christmas, with the teacher in charge of the fund. Then they all decided not to wait till Christmas. They were in favor of Miss Vance closing the deal right away. "Just think, children," Mrs. Vance said. "This is the last night Mr. Christmas will have to stay in Mr. Baxter's tumble-down old barn. I'll have my father buy him tomorrow." The children shouted again, although they were all tired and very sleepy. It had been a long day. They ran to join happy parents for the ride home through the snow. The next day, several of the big boys went with Mr. Vance to make the purchase of the old horse. Rob and Minnie were allowed to go too, for as the children said, they kind of started the whole thing. Because of the horse's weakness, it took quite a while to walk him to his new barn home. Several children were in the stable and had put in clean straw and filled the manger with fragrant hay the old farmer had donated. There were several ears of corn, a measure of oats in the feed box. Roger himself pumped a big bucket of water for Mr. Christmas to drink, and Minnie tried, with the help of several, to put a warm horse blanket on him. So many of the children brought oats and corn that Farmer Smith finally had to tell them they had enough for 9 horses. And Billy, true to his instinct, brought his can of axle grease and was busy anointing the sores on the old horse's back and sides. "My father said that this is a really good remedy," he stated importantly. Minnie tenderly rubbed the poor sore leg with some of the axle grease, too, with Billy's approval. The children could hardly bear to go home. Old Mr. Christmas had never in his whole horsey life had so much love, so much attention, or so much food. He had at least 14 lumps of brown sugar, which he, if he could have talked, would have told everyone was the only sugar he'd ever tasted in his life. There were 27 apples piled up in his feed bin between the oats and the corn. Little Minnie brought him a carrot that she had scrubbed until it looked like burnished gold. By Christmas, Mr. Christmas had so improved and was so frisky that Farmer Smith wanted to buy him. You can still come and see him, he said, and you can use your money to get another horse and do more good in this world. It ain't only horses that need help, Roger said meaningfully. I learned a lot of things this year. I learned it's a lot more fun to do things than it is to have fun not doing things and laughing. It's stuff that ain't funny at all. And so they followed Farmer Smith's advice. They put the money in the bank and called it the Mr. Christmas Fund. Before long, they found out that poor Mrs. Caper needed an operation, and Mr. Caper did not have any steady work. It was funny, the things that the Mr. Christmas Fund did, and what many people, even an old horse, could do to help other folks. Thank you, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed the story of the children and Mr. Christmas. Bye-bye now. See you next week.